Well, hello there. Welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies, we are about all things cinema. Well, I am out and about here on this dreary, rainy morning, just running a few errands, taking care of a little business. I got a return at Walmart, a couple of other returns. I got to do a drop-off of Goodwill here of some old items. And I've just been thinking about this video that you're watching right now. I've been thinking for some time about starting a discussion with the community about what is your opinion on what is the greatest film that's ever been made? Like, what is the number one greatest movie of all time? You know, like, that's an easy question to answer. But if someone were to stop you on the street right now and they were to ask you, right now, in your opinion, what do you think is the greatest movie ever made? What would be your number one film of all time? I can tell you right now, for me, that would be a very difficult question to answer. And I would just simply say, that's a hard question to answer. That's a tough one. I'm not really comfortable naming one film as the greatest film ever. I almost feel like that's too great of a burden or responsibility to put on any one feature film, because all films are different, right? Every film is unique. And it's very hard for me to definitively say, okay, this movie's the greatest movie of all time. Of course, we have all these different surveys from the American Film Institute, AFI, BFI, British Film Institute, Sight and Sound, all these different surveys from critics who rank films from, say, 100 down to 1. And so they offer their opinions about the greatest film ever made. But I always feel like it's so hard to definitively say, okay, this film, Citizen Kane or Vertigo or whatever film you want to choose, it's so hard for me to be comfortable saying this is the greatest film of all time. But what I can do is I can give you a short list of films that if we were to have a conversation around, okay, here's a short list of films that I would say would deserve to be in that conversation for consideration of greatest film of all time, I would be comfortable offering that. And so when I get back home, I'm going to show you my short list of films, my short list of titles that I think would deserve to be in that conversation of greatest film ever made. So I'm going to finish running these errands and I'll get back home and I will share that list with you. And I'm looking forward to hearing your comments in the comment section about what films you think deserve to be considered in the conversation. So be right back. All right, so I'm back at the home front. Of course, this is actually, in full disclosure, several days later. This is the power of video editing at work. But I wanted to have a discussion on greatest film of all time. That if I had to put together a list of films that I would offer for consideration of films that should be in the conversation of greatest film of all time, I've got a stack of titles over here that I'm going to submit for that consideration. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts as well as what films you would offer in this discussion. But I'm going to share my list. I've got a list of about 13 or 14 titles, but I'm also going to share some honorable mentions. I got 4 honorable mentions that I'm going to mention as well. But before I share any of these titles, let me just quickly lay the groundwork in terms of my thought process for films that should be considered in this conversation. So I got my notes here. For me, for a film to be considered among the greatest of all time and to be considered a potential greatest film ever, the film has to be transcendent in some way. So it has to be transcendent in terms of its influence or innovation and or the manner in which it speaks to the human condition. So I kind of wrote that down just to sort of capture my thoughts of what types of films would fall in that category. Because there's a lot of great movies that we watch every year. A lot of movies that we watch or that I watch that I walk away thinking to myself, wow, that is a great film, or that's a really good movie. But the titles that are in this stack are a cut above that. These titles are titles that are transcendent in their influence. They have influenced the broader cinema in some way, or they speak deeply to the human condition in a way that is timeless. So that is the criteria that goes into this list. So with that as a setup, let me share with you my 4 honorable mentions, starting off with a title from 1968. This is from one of my favorite directors of all time, Stanley Kubrick. He's one of my top 5 favorite directors. I love Kubrick, and it is his science fiction magnus opus. It's one of the greatest films of all time, but this is an honorable mention. It is 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is the 4K Ultra HD edition, and this is one heck of a 4K picture. This picture that is now going on 54 years old looks incredible on this 4K disc. This is one of the best 4K discs on the market, in my opinion, of a catalog title. This film looks absolutely incredible, and it does such a great service to this wonderful science fiction film from Stanley Kubrick. One of the things I loved about Stanley Kubrick is how he was able to create masterpieces in multiple genres, and this is a masterpiece of science fiction, and it is quite honestly very influential in terms of future science fiction films. So that's why it's an honorable mention. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Another film that I absolutely love is a film from famous director Steven Spielberg. This is a title that, if you were to ask me what is my favorite Steven Spielberg film, this would be the film. It's a film from 1985. It probably wouldn't be most people's pick, but it's my personal favorite of his films, and that's 1985's The Color Purple. I don't have the physical copy in front of me. It's somewhere in my collection, but it's The Color Purple, starring Whoopi Goldberg, Danny Glover, based on the novel by Alice Walker. It's just an incredible human story that I absolutely love. Just seeing her, her coming of age, Whoopi Goldberg's character's coming of age is just a timeless classic that I will never forget, and that I need to revisit very soon because it's been a while since I've seen that film. But The Color Purple from 1985, Steven Spielberg's film. The next film is a film from 1994 from director Robert Zemeckis, starring Tom Hanks. And it is a film that you might wonder, why am I including this on the list? And the reason I'm including it on the list is because I see this film as being highly transcendent in the way it speaks to the human condition, the way it speaks to perseverance and overcoming obstacles, and the way it speaks to how human beings can have big influence over important things. And just seeing the life of Forrest Gump portrayed in this film is a timeless treasure. I absolutely love the Forrest Gump character. I love Bubba, his friend. I love Lieutenant Dan, Jenny, Sally Field playing his mother. This is just one of the great classics of all time. It won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. And Tom Hanks, of course, won an Oscar for Best Actor for this role. This is an incredible film. I remember seeing it in theaters, and it's just a timeless classic, Forrest Gump. Now, the last honorable mention number 4 that I'll share is a film from famous Swedish director Ingmar Bergman. Now, this is a film from 1957, and it stars Max von Sydow in a classic role, and it is The Seventh Seal. This is the film from Swedish director Ingmar Bergman. It is featured in the Ingmar Bergman massive set from the Criterion Collection. This is the single edition release, the single edition Blu-ray release. And I am so happy to have this. Of course, I bought this originally, and then I bought the big Bergman set. But this is a classic title. It deals with Max von Sydow's character, who is a knight from the Crusades, and he's disillusioned from his time in war, and he's engaged in a game of chess with death. And this is just one of the great classic existential films in film history, and I really love this film from Ingmar Bergman. It is one of my honorable mentions. It's from 1957, The Seventh Seal. So these are my 4 honorable mentions, including The Color Purple, 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Color Purple, Forrest Gump, and The Seventh Seal. So 4 amazing films of cinema that I will offer as honorable mentions. So this now brings us to the films that I would submit as films to be considered potentially the greatest film of all time. And the first title is a film that I recently reviewed on this channel. It recently got a brand spanking new Criterion Collection 4K Ultra HD release. And it is one of my personal favorite films. And I love this movie. I love this director. This was his directorial debut, which is impressive in and of itself. And it is none other than Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. This is from 1941. It's the classic film from Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, about the story of Charles Foster Kane and his rise to power and just his struggles with finding happiness in life. It's just an incredible film, and this is an amazing addition from the Criterion Collection that goes deep into the making of this film, that goes deep into Orson Welles' life and the work that he did in the theater before doing this film, and all of the people who were involved in the process of making this absolutely stunning piece of cinema. This film was highly innovative, not in necessarily originating a lot of the concepts that were used, but it was very original in how it combined different techniques that had been done in previous films, but he put a different spin on it with the camera work and several other aspects of the production of this film. This is just one of the greatest films that's ever been made. It's called Citizen Kane. Of course, this is the 70th anniversary edition. This came out 10 years ago. This is the Blu-ray, and this looks absolutely fantastic. This 4K Ultra HD looks just a little bit better. It is just a little bit tighter on the visuals, and this overall package from Criterion with all of these incredible supplements make this one of the best physical media releases of the year last year, and probably one of the best overall physical media releases in the last decade in my mind of a single edition movie. So this is Citizen Kane. I am offering that great movie for consideration. The second film that I would offer for consideration of greatest film of all time is a film from famous Japanese director Yasuhiro Ozu, and it's a film from 1953, and it is a classic human family story about different generations and how we as human beings relate to one another through the generations. And it is just a classic piece of cinema from the master, Mr. Ozu, and his Tokyo Story. This is an amazing film that I simply cannot recommend enough. On the back here, it just describes it as a profoundly stirring evocation of elemental humanity and universal heartbreak. Tokyo Story is the crowning achievement of the unparalleled Yasuhiro Ozu. The film, which follows an aging couple's journey to visit their grown children in bustling post-war Tokyo, surveys the rich and complex world of family life with the director's customary delicacy and incisive perspective on social mores. So this is a tremendous film. If you have not seen this film, do yourself a favor and check out Tokyo Story. It's a timeless classic. I see elements in this story that remind me of my own family life, and I think you'll find the same experience watching this film. It's from 1953, so it's going on, I guess next year will make for its 70th anniversary. Definitely check this film out, Tokyo Story. The next film that I'll offer up is another Japanese title from a director that is in my top 5 favorite directors of all time, Akira Kirasawa. It's a film from 1954, so that probably gives away the title right then and there. It's one of the great influential films in all of cinema, and it is an absolute masterpiece of filmmaking. And this is a great addition from the Criterion Collection of Seven Samurai. This is a fantastic, amazing film that's been greatly influential in cinema. It influenced the Magnificent Seven film that came out a few years later. And this is just an amazing film from Akira Kirasawa. It's basically one of the most thrilling movie epics of all time. Seven Samurai tells the story of a 16th century village whose desperate inhabitants hire the eponymous warriors to protect them from invading bandits. So fairly simple story, but just a beautiful film that is wonderfully executed by this master director. Kirasawa is one of my top 5 favorite directors of all time, and this is one of his absolute masterpieces, Seven Samurai from Akira Kirasawa. All right, so the next film that I'm going to offer up as films to be considered among the greatest or potentially the greatest film, is a film from famous director Billy Wilder. Of course, Billy Wilder has created some of the great classics of all time. He was a wonderful writer, screenwriter, director, and this is one of his best films. And it's a film from 1950, and it really speaks to, when you think about people in careers and people who are in the entertainment industry, one of the struggles that people go through at a certain point in their career is continuing to be relevant as they get older. And this is a film that beautifully illustrates that, and it's Sunset Boulevard. This is a wonderful film from Billy Wilder, and it stars William Holden, Gloria Swanson, and Erich von Stroheim. And it's from 1950, and it of course contains the very classic statement from Gloria Swanson's character, one of the best lines ever delivered in cinema. "All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up." And it is a line that is very famous, and when you see it delivered, it's very impactful, and it tells you everything you need to know about this incredible, tragic story. I highly recommend Sunset Boulevard if you have not seen it. And this is an actually pretty nice edition, this Blu-ray edition here. It actually has over 2 hours of special features. And I need to actually revisit this title, and because I have not seen it in a long time, but it is one of the great classics of cinema. One of the great things I love about Sunset Boulevard is that it is a movie that is about making movies. So you see the behind the scenes process of making films, and I love movies that do that. This is a film that does that. The sound, Singing in the Rain is a movie that does that very well. I love films that show the process of making movies, and this is one of the greatest classics that has done it, Sunset Boulevard from Billy Wilder. So if you haven't seen Sunset Boulevard, I highly recommend it. Now, the next two titles are titles from my absolute favorite director of all time, Sir Alfred Hitchcock, and these are two of his masterpiece films among a tall stack of masterpieces. They are part of this 4K Ultra HD set that came out, I believe, in 2020. And the two films that I'm going to offer up here, now this set includes Rear Window, Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds. And this is a great 4K Ultra HD set. If you find this on sale, do not hesitate to pick this up. This is from the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, and it's definitely worth it. But the two films I'm going to offer up are 1958's Vertigo and Psycho from 1960. These are the two films that I will offer up in this discussion. Vertigo starred James Stewart in a classic role back in 1958 as Scotty, and he is a man that is basically helping a friend of his investigate his wife for some strange behavior. And this story goes into some really unexpected territory and is just a classic of cinema. It is very inventive in the way that it was made, and the music from Bernard Herrmann is just absolutely classic. Psycho from 1960, starring Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh, is one of the great classics of all cinema. It is a film that's been studied in film classes for many years, and the shower scene is one of the most incredibly put together scenes ever put on film in terms of the editing and the way that film was shot and edited and put together and sequenced. Just one of the great classics of all cinema. I highly recommend it. And the funny thing about Psycho is, of course, the original movie is, in my mind, one of the greatest films ever made, one of the most perfect films ever made in terms of the overall execution and pacing of the film and the way it was shot and put together. But I actually like the sequels as well. I mean, the sequels for Psycho are really, really good. And the television show Bates Motel that is based upon this story is also excellent, starring Vera Farmiga and Freddie Highmore. So I highly recommend Bates Motel, but I would definitely recommend, before seeing Bates Motel, watch the original movie Psycho, let it wash over you, maybe watch it again, and then go watch the 5 seasons of Bates Motel. That would be some really satisfying binge watching if you are up for that. So I highly, highly recommend that. Psycho and then Bates Motel, the TV series. So Next on my list of greatest films of all time, to be considered greatest of all, is a film from 1939. It is an all-time classic starring Judy Garland. And I don't really need to go into a lot of description of this film. It's The Wizard of Oz. And this is a great 4K Ultra HD edition of this classic title. This film looks really, really good in 4K Ultra HD for this film that is now over 80 years old. It came out in 1939, which is in itself, I probably need to do a video just on the great films that came out in 1939. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see that video, because 1939 was a landmark year in cinema. There were so many amazing films that came out in that year. This is one of those amazing films, The Wizard of Oz, and it's just one of the classics of all time. And what more can I say about this film, Wizard of Oz? The next film is a title from director Steven Spielberg. Now, I mentioned before that The Color Purple, for me, is my personal favorite of his films, but a film that I would offer to be considered in this video as one of the greatest films of all time, that should be considered potentially the greatest film of all time, is a film that came out in the 1990s starring Liam Neeson as Oscar Schindler, and it is Schindler's List. This is an amazing film from director Steven Spielberg. This is the 25th anniversary edition of this film. I believe Schindler's List came out in 1993, I believe. I believe it did. But this is just one of the most amazing films. Yes, 1993, I believe, or 92. This is just one of the most amazing films of all time. It, of course, deals with World War II, the Holocaust at that time, and it deals with it in just an incredible way. It's just one of those amazing films you have to see. Of course, this is a legendary picture here of the girl in the red jacket, and this is a very important part of the film. But this is an incredible human story. It's an incredible movie that is transcendent on so many different levels. And it's just an important film that I think any cinephile needs to see. It is Schindler's List from Steven Spielberg. Definitely check this one out. The next film is a film from Italy, from famous director Federico Fellini. And this is a film that is among the greatest films of all time. And it also deals with the process of filmmaking from a director's perspective. And it is in some ways slightly autobiographical. It stars Marcello Mastroianni, and it is the film from 1963, and it's Federico Fellini's 8½. Marcello Mastroianni plays a director who's struggling creatively in putting this film together. And it deals with the story of this director in this film, but it also is somewhat reflective of Federico Fellini himself. And it's just an extraordinary film. It shows you the process of movie making from different perspectives. And I just absolutely love this film. I need to revisit it. This is part of the Essential Fellini set that I also have, but this is the single edition Blu-ray that came out several years ago. It's 1963's 8½, from Federico Fellini. Amazing, amazing film. All right, we're coming down to the last, I think, 5 films here. And this is a film, or 4, yeah. This is a film from famous filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola. It is a title that I am really excited about for this particular year in physical media, because from what I've heard, we're going to be getting these films on 4K Ultra HD this year, I believe, which is very exciting. This is the Coppola restoration of The Godfather, Godfather Part 2 and Godfather Part 3. The film that I would offer, though, in this conversation is The Godfather Part 2. I think it's one of the greatest sequels that's ever been made. It is an absolutely stunning piece of cinema. Robert De Niro is masterful in this movie. I believe he won an Academy Award for his role in this film. Al Pacino is masterful in this film. It's just one of the great films that's ever been made. So I'm offering up The Godfather Part 2. Some may argue that The Godfather, which started it all, should be the one to submit for this conversation, but I'm offering up The Godfather Part 2. But let me know in the comments below what you think of these films and if you're excited about The Godfather 4K coming out this year. But The Godfather Part 2, oh, my stack is falling apart here. Excuse me. All right. The next film I'm going to offer is a film from a wonderful director that I greatly admire in terms of his voice in cinema, his voice in portraying Black stories in cinema, and just his overall cinematic vision. And that is director Spike Lee and his 1989 masterpiece, Do the Right Thing. This is a wonderful, wonderful film that speaks deeply to social issues, and it really chronicles one day, one hot summer day in Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant, New York City. And it is just an absolutely extraordinary film. And I'll read the back here. It says, set on one block of Brooklyn's Bed-Stuy do-or-die neighborhood at the height of summer, this 1989 masterpiece by Spike Lee confirmed him as a writer and filmmaker of peerless vision and passionate social engagement. Over the course of a single day, the easygoing interactions of a cast of unforgettable characters, Da Major, Mother Sister, Mr. Senor Love Daddy, Tina, Sweet Dick Willie, Buggin' Out, Radio Raheem, Sal, Pino, Vito, and Lee's Mookie among them. Spike Lee appeared in this film as Mookie. Give way to heated confrontations as tensions rise among racial fault lines, ultimately exploding into violence, punctuated by the anthemic refrain of Public Enemy's Fight the Power. The opening of this film, legendary. You gotta see it. Do the Right Thing is a landmark in American cinema, as politically and emotionally charged and as relevant now as when it first hit the big screen back in 1989. This is an amazing film. It's a film that came out in 1989, and it speaks powerfully to situations even to this day over 30 years later. So I cannot say enough great things about this film. Definitely check this out. I believe a 4K Ultra HD edition of this film came out. This is a new 4K digital restoration Blu-ray from Criterion. And I don't know exactly how it compares, but this Blu-ray looks absolutely fantastic. So definitely check out Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. And now we are down to the last two films. And these are films that I simply cannot recommend enough. The first is a film from 2012 from a director that I think has made two of the best films that have come out in the last 15 years. And that's director Kathryn Bigelow with The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. So this is a film from 2012, Zero Dark 30. It basically deals with, it says, the greatest manhunt in history. It deals with the intelligence and all that went into us ultimately being able to hunt down, find, capture, and deal with Osama bin Laden. It says here from the Academy Award-winning writer and director of The Hurt Locker. The Hurt Locker won Best Picture the year that it came out, starring Jeremy Renner and Anthony Mackie. This is Zero Dark 30, and this is just an absolutely amazing film. And this 4K Ultra HD looks stunning. This is a great 4K Ultra HD disc. And this is just a great, thrilling film that you absolutely must see. It tells you a lot about the intelligence that went into the finding and hunting of Osama bin Laden and the actual operations itself. And Jessica Chastain is just absolutely fantastic in this film. And I just simply cannot recommend it enough. It's an absolutely phenomenal, phenomenal film from Kathryn Bigelow. Definitely check it out. And I have a Taste of Directors series entry for Kathryn Bigelow and several of the directors that I've mentioned here, Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick. So definitely check those out. And of course, Billy Wilder's coming up very shortly on the channel. All right, so the last film that I'm going to offer up as a film that I would submit as consideration for greatest film of all time, that I would submit in this wonderful conversation, is a film from French director Agnès Varda. And of course, she has an amazing set recently released from the Criterion Collection called The Complete Films of Agnès Varda, which is an absolute gift. Make this gift to yourself. If you can get this on sale in the next flash sale, the next Barnes & Noble sale, or Amazon sale, Well worth picking up. If you are interested in French wave films, if you're interested in foreign cinema, if you have an interest in Agnes Varda's work, I cannot recommend this enough. This is an amazing, amazing release from the Criterion Collection of her complete films. And one of the films in here that I'm offering up is a film that I'm offering up because of its transcendental nature and the way that it speaks to the human condition. And that is a film from 1962, and it's called Cleo from 5 to 7. So this is an amazing film from Agnes Varda. It is included in this wonderful set, The Complete Films of Agnes Varda. And it is a film that I simply cannot recommend enough. It's one of her best films, and it's a film that deals with the life of a young lady in the early 1960s in Paris, France. She is waiting to hear the results of some testing to see if she has, of some medical tests to see if she has cancer. And just seeing that little portion of her life in that two and a half hour period of her life, or 2 hour period from 5 to 7, as she's going through the streets of Paris, going to her apartment, the people that she's interacting with, and just seeing her journey and her emotional state as she goes through that process of waiting on these test results. It is absolutely transformational, seeing her character transform over that period and seeing that journey in that short period of time. But it also speaks to us as individuals in terms of, wow, how would I respond if I was in her shoes? How would I respond if I was in her situation? And it really makes you think about that. And it's just transcendental in that way, and transcendental in the way it speaks to the human condition and how we deal with either tragic consequences, or how we deal with high pressure, high tension situations, or how we deal with uncertainty in life and deal with our own mortality. So Cleo from 5 to 7, an amazing film from legendary director Miss Agnes Varda. So highly, highly recommended. So those are the films that I would offer up as among the greatest of all time. All right, a quick recap of the titles that I covered here. I covered Citizen Kane from Orson Welles, Yasuhiro Ozu's Tokyo Story, Akira Kirasawa's Seven Samurai, Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard. I'm very much looking forward to the Taste Director Series entry of Billy Wilder. So that's coming up very soon on this channel later this month. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo and Psycho, two of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion. Who doesn't love this film, Wizard of Oz, The Wizard of Oz? Just classic. A very important film from Steven Spielberg, Schindler's List. 8.5 from Federico Fellini. The Godfather Part Two. I am so excited about the 4K edition of this coming out, and I'm hoping that it's a nice upgrade over this Blu-ray set. Do the Right Thing from Spike Lee. Very, very important film that speaks to us today. Zero Dark 30 from Catherine Bigelow. And Cleo from 5 to 7 from Miss Agnes Varda, part of this wonderful set here. Of course, my honorable mentions again were 4 incredible films. 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick, one of my top 5 directors of all time. Forrest Gump from Robert Zemeckis. The Color Purple, the 1985 film from Steven Spielberg, my personal favorite Spielberg film. And Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal from 1957. Just an amazing, amazing set of films. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think about these films? What do you think about these titles? What do you think about this topic we're talking about? If someone were to stop you on the street right now and they were to ask you, hey, what do you think the greatest movie of all time is? What is the greatest film ever? And if you were to put together a list of 10 titles or a dozen titles or so, what titles do you think should belong in that conversation or should be considered potentially the greatest film of all time? Let me know that in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time at the movies. Peace.